Happy Saturday, everyone. Welcome to an episode of What Makes The Witcher Great. Really excited to be here today. Hope everyone is having a fantastic week. Today, I'm joined here with Thomas from the New Dad podcast. He helped work with the reviews on the channel during The Witcher Season 1, and he's a big part of the Song of Ice and Fire community. What's going on, Thomas?
Not too much, just quarantining over here in Chicago, Illinois, like many people across the U.S. and wherever you may be located, to be honest. As Kyle said, Azor Ahai had mentioned, I'm a host of the New Dad podcast. Some people know me as Uncle Tickles. If you're from the Song of Ice and Fire community, you might know me as Tomas or Hema Helmuth, a man that goes by many names, Yeah, primarily I'm a dad of two sons who are under 2, and right now that's what I'm doing. My wife's working, and I'm full-time, Mr. Mom, and it's been pretty fucking awesome, to be honest.
So like I said, Thomas was we were co-scripting stuff together. We'll talk a little bit about something that we're going to be doing in the future towards the end of the podcast, re-reviewing the season of The Witcher. We're going to talk about that, but today we're going to talk about what makes The Witcher great. So we're going to talk about the fandom, we're going to talk about the books, we're going to talk about the show, and it's overall we're going to really positive stuff. We're going to do a little bit of Game of Thrones, The Song of Ice and Fire comparison to The Witcher, and kind of talk about how The Witcher can benefit and learn from some of the mistakes that Game of Thrones made on in the later seasons. But for those of you who haven't checked out Thomas, you can find the link to all of his social media, podcasts, and all that in the description of the video. So I guess first question, let's start off with kind of did a little intro with you there, man.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about how you got into the Song of Ice and Fire, and then kind of how you discovered The Witcher.
Yeah, no. So I, kind of fell in love with reading late in life. It's something I'm so glad I pushed myself to do, because it's clearly anyone who does read knows how gratifying and rewarding the experience is. And so, quickly went on from kind of Dan Brown type stuff and got into some sci-fi fantasy, and had known about the Song of Ice and Fire series for a little bit, but wasn't on it, and then I read about the TV show being made, watched the first season, and just realized I have to get into these books, because this is good and I feel like I'm missing something. And that just was a rabbit hole, right? Because once you start reading the books, you start going to places like Westeros.org, and
that's where I originated too, man. So I watched the show first, and then that's where I started searching theories. Yeah. That's Elio Garcia and Linda. Great website.
100%. I mean, and then that leads you to Reddit, and then all of a sudden from there you find podcasts like History Westeros, Radio Westeros, and then that introduces you to the community. At least that was my kind of gateway drug series. So and really quickly, I fell down the rabbit hole. I love the books. I never read anything that was quite like that in terms of the levels of kind of, I don't want to say interpretation, but just how George will put things that mean something on the face value, and all of a sudden a second meaning, and maybe even a third meaning. And it's wild, because we're doing Valar reread over at History of Westeros, and this is probably my 5th reread of the books, and I'm still learning. People are pointing stuff out that
finding new stuff all the time.
Totally, and maybe it's not new, to a lot of people, but it's new to me, and I've read these books so many times. It's just so that was my gateway, and then the people. I don't know that I would have been sucked down the rabbit hole so fast if the fandom just wasn't so kind and encouraging and positive for the most part. And I'm talking
because you've been to Ice and Fire Con, something that I've never been to.
Yes.
I've been
my God.
But you've been a bunch of different times, right?
Yeah. I've been well, actually, no, I take that back. I've only been once, and I've been to Con of Thrones once. Yeah. I guess this year would have been my second year.
That's where we got to meet in the first. We met at was it last year?
Yeah.
We met last year. Yeah.
Yeah, we were, and then we had known each other. We had chatted. It's one of those. It's a cool part of the community too, because you get to know people pretty well online. But then you go to these cons, or you have these meetups, and you get to put a face to a name. And it was on the way to the Bunny Hutch party in the elevator, and you were with In Deep Geek, and it was actually a very humbling experience for me, because I was with History of Westeros entourage. and there's a bunch of exchanges, and they're pretty big in the community. You're obviously a presence in it. Indie Geek's a huge guy, and then there's like a fucking random dude, me, and he's, oh, how do I know you? And I knew Dad wasn't a thing at that point. I moderated for History of Westeros' Facebook group, but I didn't think that was significant enough to mention. So I was just like, you probably shouldn't know me. I'm a fucking nobody. And it was just like, but the kindest guy, everyone, the whole community, it has just been so cool.
You had been in a bunch of the live chats too, because we were doing
for sure
trying to do it was kind of the last hurrah to have some of these speculative like guessing games for what's going to happen in the next episode and that kind of stuff. So, and the live chats were crazy during the last season. So that's what I mean. I think that's how we really started chatting first, was in like kind of in the comment sections of videos, like a lot of people in the chat.
Well, yeah. And it turned me on to your videos and your theories. And then it would kind of get me to, and that's what's cool about it, is everyone's so accessible, right? If you have a question, about your favorite movie, you can't necessarily go to the director or the lead actor and say, hey, like, is this what you were going for? Is this what you're doing? But with A Song of Ice and Fire, granted, you guys aren't George R.R. Martin, but I mean, a lot of you guys are like the next best thing, and you guys are the ones that are producing this really smart content that's cutting edge, and you can actually, go to Azor A Hype and ask him what he thinks about something, and he'll reply. Or Aziz from History of Westeros, or Lady Gwyn and Yoke Boy at Radio Westeros. It's awesome. It's just a very rewarding thing, and it makes you want to go deeper and learn more, and that's just kind of the journey that I've been on with those books. And it led into The Witcher, right? Because all of a sudden that's gone. The show's over. I've read the books X amount of times. What's next? I think is the next big question for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, I had played the Witcher games, and then I, just been so interested in the lore because, the games are there's so many cutscenes. It's like almost if you took all the cutscenes from the games, you would have like a 20-hour movie or something. You know what I mean? Probably even longer than that. But that's kind of how I got into it. We're going to dive into that in just a second. Yeah. I want to shout out some awesome people in the chat. And we got Maura Lee. He says, throwing a coin to my favorite YouTubers, #love. Really, really appreciate that, Maura Lee. We got some other awesome people in the chat. We are going to feature some of your awesome favorite comments, what you think makes The Witcher great. Got a few more questions for Thomas, but this is going to really kind of be a fun, open discussion about The Witcher fandom, the games. We'll talk about everything. So
yeah, I'm not afraid for the chat to make it hard on me. This is my first guest role in a live chat. So throw the whole barrel at me. Let's go through the gamut.
So we have John Haymaker, Metrophage, Macro is, I believe, are you Polish, Macro? The interpretations and the adaptations from the books, great insight on that. When you're doing a translation, there's all sorts of things that kind of get mixed up with wording to the English language. So we're always appreciative of that. Morally, of course, Nicola, Jurmengand, Loki's son, Anna Iglesias. Who else do we have in here? Like I said, Tubbs, Kate Bertinsky, and we already went Anna. And I'm sure anybody that's joining us today, let us know what you think makes The Witcher great in the live chat. So yeah, that's really interesting. So Song of Ice and Fire kind of drove you towards A Song of Ice and Fire. They have similarities, of course, in their universe. They're both fantasy driven and, have politics and magic, which are more so. But what were kind of some of the things that really stood out to you from The Witcher in the beginning? Because there are differences, right? Was it the characters? Was it the setting, the more fairy tale-ish setting? What was the thing that kind of really pulled you in for The Witcher?
Well, I think the biggest thing right off the bat was, A Song of Ice and Fire. There are these large books, right? They're monstrous, and as you get deeper, they get bigger. Where The Last Wish, as I was kind of doing my research and finding out, a little bit more about it, it's a series of short stories, right? And that was a huge appeal to me. It was the fact that there's a little bit more instant gratification with a short story. My first love when and this was, I had mentioned falling into reading late, but when I was a kid, I actually did and really enjoy short stories. I just had this attention span. They worked for me. And so that was something I was excited about, was tackling a book of short stories. So that was the first thing that was really attractive. And yeah, the other, it was the fairy tale-esque type storytelling. And I have something right here. This is my dad, a book that he read to us, which is Grimm's Fairy Tales when we
Oh,
were
great.
little kids. And, this isn't the exact copy that he had, but it's the exact, it's a replica, or not a replica. It is the exact copy. It's just not the one he owned. I found the exact year that it was made and everything. Found it online, paid a hefty price for it. So I have that to read to my son, right? But I did fall in love with these fairy tales, and Grimm's, if you've read them, they're dark, right? There's a parallel there, which I also, so that hit home. It was close to home. There's a little nostalgic properties attached to my father. And those were the things that immediately sucked me in. And then the writing's great. It's good storytelling. I like doing the research of finding out which fairy tales were inspiring each short story. And you had mentioned
Slavic mythology is a little bit different than English and Scottish.
Totally.
Some of the things that George pulls from, yeah.
Well, and you had mentioned the individual in our chat who's from Poland, and I think they were pointing out some of the language things in the
podcast of surprise.
The podcast of surprise, yeah, which was awesome. That was super insightful, and I love that's the sort of shit I love. I love it. So yeah, I mean that it's a rewarding thing. The books are well written. The characters are great. You have that recipe, and you're gonna probably suck me in.
So to clarify, you've read The Last Wish. You're getting into Sword of Destiny.
Correct.
Haven't gotten to the main novels yet. So a little bit on the Unsullied side, which is awesome because
100%.
You can give us the perspective of, because I think too, what's really interesting about The Witcher is like A Song of Ice and Fire had already been around for a really long time. And then we found the adaptation, and the story isn't finished yet. And The Witcher, all the books are finished and we have all of these games. So there's so much to pull through, but we're only in season 1, right? So a lot of people got into Game of Thrones, like, the last season is coming out and they binged the whole show to make sure they could catch up and see what was going on weekly when they would release a new episode. So that's super cool. And I feel like, like hardcore fans like me and Macro and Yormi in the chat, Jormungandr, Yormi short. I love this. Sorry, I have to be Jormungand every time. But that's something that's awesome because, like, there is a hardcore base of fans, but like 75% of fans are just getting into The Witcher. And with the success that it had in season 1 and Netflix saying, hey, we want 7-8 seasons of this. This is our Game of Thrones. Like, we're committed to telling this whole story. Like, that's super encouraging. And we kind of saw all of this, like this great thing happen with the books of The Witcher, which happened with the Song of Ice and Fire series. George R. R. Martin had 15 million copies sold before the show came out, and now he has 90 million copies of his books sold worldwide. In January, I think there was like 3 million copies of The Last Wish or something like that just sold, and I was trying to buy one for a giveaway for the channel, and I couldn't even get a copy on any Amazon. Amazon America, all these different bookstores were sold out. So it's clear that the excitement, people want more fantasy. We all obviously know these other new shows like Wheel of Time and Lord of the Rings are going to come out in the future, but this is something that people can get into because it has similar characters and a similar story and in a similar type of setting, and people are really excited about it with kind of how disappointing of an ending people felt like the lackluster ending we got with Game of Thrones.
Oh yeah, and I think there's we can talk about a very specific parallel as far as The Witcher giving something that Game of Thrones really disappointed on, and it was something. The first episode, it's something that's kind of cool, but also kind of a challenge. I'm sure I know we talked about the challenge of covering a show like The Witcher, which does a dump, right? Like they dump all the episodes that are available. How do you cover that? It's not like you have a week to put out content on the upcoming episode and rehash what happened in the final episode.
Yeah, like 5 different days, 5 different subjects or something.
Right, exactly. So it's kind of a crazy thing. But that first day, I think there was maybe 5 to 10 memes that I saw of Geralt, and it was like, this is my Rhaegar. Or that the first fight scene in the first episode, we're like, this is what I wanted Arthur Dayne to be, And so, there were some things that the show did immediately that were, both reminiscent and both kind of improvements on A Song of Ice and Fire. Now, Game of Thrones, the last few seasons had its challenges, but those first 4 seasons are, I'd put them up against a lot. Obviously, I know you're very favorable for the show as well. The first season of The Witcher is excellent. Let's see I think they're going to keep getting better.
Well, I mean, the timeline thing that they had to do, like I've had this discussion with Aziz, on the podcast and also on the channel a couple of different times. And we've talked about how they did the adaptation. And obviously, with how things go at the end of Sword of Destiny and when Geralt meets Ciri, there's some changes in the adaptation which don't make sense, but also for the average view, like for Game of Thrones, a lot of people don't understand like how many people they sold a lot of books, but how many people weren't book readers? Like Game of Thrones is getting 20, 30 million views. Like, you know what I mean? The average viewer wasn't necessarily reading the book. So they had to, work things out in a certain way. And that's what The Witcher had to do with the timeline stuff in season 1, which is a little bit confusing. We actually got a really funny question in chat.
Okay. Yeah.
It's kind of off topic, but let's showcase this. Yormi says Aretuza versus Hogwarts.
Ooh.
Which school do you prefer? I mean, Hogwarts for sure. I think like Aretuza
does not seem fun at all.
Yeah.
It's
there's beautiful ladies, but I don't know if that's necessarily. I mean, there's like it's pretty abusive and
Well, as I say, you have to be kind of a sadomasochist if you're going to Aretuza.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, Hogwarts seems way cooler. It seems like you'd have a lot more fun. I don't know, but to be contrary, I'm gonna go the other way. Just because I like to be spanked a little bit.
So Morley says Hogwarts. We have John Haymaker says Hogwarts. I'm guessing Yormi, you might say Aretuza. I don't know. I can't really predict. By the way, Harry Potter, I rewatch those movies all the time. Love the books. So, there's Yormi. Okay, here we go. Yormi says Hogwarts probably has the more sympathetic teacher because if Aretuza, if you don't graduate, you get eeled. Yeah, that is something that I certainly wouldn't want to happen to me. I wouldn't want to be an eel.
Are we sure that the life of an eel isn't that great? I don't know. I'm not about to say that's a horrible life. I don't know. I got to put more thought into. I got to really put myself in the place of an eel. Are we talking about an electric eel? That would be dope. If it's a moray eel, that's maybe changes things a little bit, but still pretty sweet. I don't know. There's other eels too. I don't know.
Yeah, this all goes back to that quote about the fish and the tree. The fish being, how do you know a fish can't climb? All those different, we're not going down that rabbit hole.
But I'm just saying, like an eel. I know. I was just watching The Sword in the Stone with my son, and there's the scene where Arthur and Merlin turn into the fish, and they're swimming around. And I was like, I think it would be pretty dope to be a fish. So maybe an eel wouldn't be too bad either.
So yeah,
eel lives matter. Eel lives matter. Is what we had.
Eel lives do matter. Let's talk a little bit about the Witcher show, because me and you worked on the first four reviews that we did. Now we're gonna talk a little bit about reviewing. I don't know if you guys would be interested in chat, but we're thinking about starting something called the Witching Hour and reviewing the Witcher season, kind of doing something like Nerd Soup does, where we would go over an episode, kind of, breakdown scenes, cinematography, and stuff like that. So that's something that we're considering. But let's talk a little bit about the cinematography, the casting, the characters from the Witcher show, because it was obviously super popular. Henry Cavill, he lobbied for the role. Big deal. And then he ended up getting it. I think they went through 250 different or 300 different castings, and he still got the role. He plays the Witcher games. He's super into it. Obviously they had some newer names, some unknown names, and now they kind of got their own Game of Thrones, where they found their Kit Haringtons and their Sophie Turners, and now they can move forward with people that that female actress is a star, or this is kind of how they're going to do things with maybe some lesser known actors. So what was your thoughts on the character? What was your favorite character from season 1? your favorite episode? Let's kind of go down those rabbit holes.
So I think my favorite characters were some of the side characters in the show. Yeah, although let's address the casting. I think they did a really fantastic job. I think that's one thing they really nailed. For me, I loved Mousak. I loved Iced. I thought he was one of my favorite characters. And because
he's got really cool stuff that happens in The Last Wish.
Yeah,
the question of price.
Yes, well, yeah, the question of price is it's my favorite story. It's one of my favorite stories. So The Grain of Truth and Question of Price are my two favorite stories from Last Wish. And so it was interesting watching the series, and I was reading the book Last Wish like in a very hurried state because I was trying to help you write. And at some point, maybe we need to talk about my first draft of the first episode and how that was just like thrown right back. It was so bad, but no, it was, you know, those smaller characters. I thought, you know, I really enjoyed. And I just think overall the way that they did it, and you talk about the cinematography, that was something I don't think anyone was really upset about.
Especially episode 3, Betrayer Moon, like the horror vibes that the wide angle shots were fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, and it was just such a well done series, and for a first season as well, you know, and for them to nail it like they did, you know, even the someone who to me in the books isn't totally likable, but in the show I found myself, and maybe it was more of an appreciation for the actress, but the actress who plays Calanth.
Yeah, and she was the one who played Maggie the Frog.
Or Maggie the Frog, yeah.
Maggie the Frog in Game of Thrones.
And she just does such a good job in the show. I mean, I really feel like I could probably sit here and, you know, like jerk off every actor or actress that was in there because I really thought they did a great job.
Because Kalantha does have some of those Cersei vibes, someone that you love to hate.
Oh,
and in the book, she's a little more ruthless for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, coming from someone who was reading the books and then trying to watch the episodes, I was trying to read the stories before the episodes. I kind of wanted to go in with my own thoughts of the adaptation and that sort when I was writing for you. And so, yeah, I found as a dislikable character, and I'm interested to go back and reread this series. Not, you know, like Game of Thrones, perfect example. I hated Jaime Lannister on my first read, even though he has that tremendous arc, you know, where he becomes more redeemable towards the end of the books. I still was like, but you know, as I read through it more and more times, I love him. I love Theon.
He's my favorite POV.
Yeah.
POV from the rereads.
Yeah, so Jaime, Theon, these are people I didn't like when I first read, and on conversely, like Barristan Selmy and Tyrion, I loved on my first reads, and now that I've read it a few times, I'm finding more problematic, you know, my relationship with my like for them. So I'm excited to reread a lot of this stuff and see if I have the same feelings about characters or see how they change, obviously, as I become more aware of how the season ends. But yeah, I mean, I think, you know, the question of price episode was really good. I think that was done pretty loyally. There were some changes, but I didn't think anything too crazy, except for I believe there's a scene with Ciri with like the Elfgard or in the forest, right? In the books that they didn't include in that episode, which would be my one gripe. But that's the only. You know,
there's Brokilon Forest stuff that they didn't include in the first season that was very highly discussed on Reddit. People were pretty upset about it. But I mean, the showrunner explained some of the ideologies behind that. She was actually on Reddit discussing with those people. So
really,
I applaud, you know, trying to take on people who are not necessarily sympathetic to some of the changes that were made in the show.
For sure. But you know, those were the episodes I really liked, and I thought episode 1 was really good. And
it's interesting how they picked the lesser evil to be the first.
I was surprised.
Story, yeah, right.
I'm very surprised by that. But I thought it worked, and part of the reason I liked it was, you know, you see Calanth and Ice die in episode 1, and so part of me was set up to be like, well, is the show going to just choose to? This is our exposure to these characters and we don't get anything else. And I found that hard to believe. And so I was happy in the question of price where we get to see them again, right? And we get to spend a whole episode pretty much with them.
We see them later in the season as well, too.
Yeah, exactly. So that was something I really enjoyed about the show and the way it did it. And I just to be totally candid, I think that there was a part of me as I was watching it, I think the first 3 or 4 episodes, I was wondering, like, are these going to be standalone kind of monster hunting episodes? Yeah, kind of like X-Files was early on.
Yeah, monster of the week type stuff.
Yeah, and that's what I thought. I'm like, okay, well, if they go this way, I'm not going to be mad at it. I was enjoying them. And then you see how they kind of piece it together and the timeline stuff becomes more evident. And, you know, I think, what was it? Right before the episode before Question of Price is where they give you all the hints to kind of put it together. And then Question of Price, they really drive it
Betrayer
home.
Moon, they did a lot of the Yennefer origin story stuff.
Yes. So you know, I enjoyed all of that. You know, it was all reasons I loved it. But I will, you know, there was a part of me, and this isn't critical by any means, but I was I was up in the air and uncertain about, okay, do I want them to be more plot centric, kind of each episode builds on it, or do I like the Monster of the Week type episodes? And I think I eventually will choose the episodic type build upon. I think that's more rewarding for people.
We're going to highlight some other comments here. We got Maura Lee says, I love the character of Renfrey. And then Yormi again says, episode 1 in the killing of Renfrey is quite the defining moment in Geralt's life. So it made sense to me. And that really did set the tone for the season, because we get the whole Butcher of Blaviken stuff. We see that, humans can be the worst monsters, and Geralt has the lesser evil thread that we see go throughout the whole series. And this is going to be something that we question as an audience, like, hey, like, what is the lesser evil? That is something that is super important in the story and in the books and the games, and like in the decision-making process of all the different characters. So for them to do that in the first episode is kind of like almost the brand getting pushed out of the tower moment. We're like, well, damn, like, you know what I mean? Like, that's pretty big. Yeah. Like, Geralt, like, even though you could see that Renfrey and Stregobor each had their motivations, you could see Geralt had quite a bit in common for Renfrey. And he felt that, like, he felt that, her life was derailed similarly to his. And there was just this, like, real sense of tragedy behind this first story. And then that's what pulls you in. You're like, damn, if this is the first episode, then there's going to be a lot more impactful emotional moments that are going to pull us in, that we can, kind of identify with.
For sure. Yeah. And yeah, that's a great call on Renfrey. I think because she's introduced in the first episode, sometimes, it's easy to kind of lose sight of some of that, but an amazing character. And I mean, an excellent point as far as why start there too, with it being a defining moment shaping Geralt. I hadn't considered that, but it seems pretty obvious after being pointed out.
Yeah, because the first short story is the snowy Striga fight in Temeria in the book. So that's a little bit of a change, but I do like how they set that up first, because they give us a little bit more of an introduction to Geralt instead of because they're like the whole stuff that's going on with Full Test, that would have been maybe a little bit like throwing people a little bit more into the like deep political stuff, and like we don't see Full Test as much. So seeing Iced and Kalantha and them, and then the lesser evil stuff, and then them kind of, putting that side by side with what Geralt's experiencing, and then Ciri kind of, Ciri having a little bit of a bigger role. So it was really interesting, the decision for them to pick the lesser evil in Renfrey, and then kind of make that a defining thing for Geralt, because Renfrey and Ciri have a lot in common. So them setting that up was cool.
Absolutely. I mean, and speaking of choices being interesting, I was disappointed after the completing season 1 that Grain of Truth wasn't there, but very happy to see that they had casted for that to show up in episode or season 2, correct?
Christopher Hivju.
Yeah, Tormund. Exactly. Tormund. Yeah. So that's one, I mean, you want to talk about hype. That's very exciting for me, that being one of my favorite stories. And again, that's one that I think for people who like the fairy tale aspect of some of these, I think you'll find a lot of parallels to some familiar fairy tales.
I think people were having a discussion before the season too, like which short stories are they going to include in the season?
Yeah.
They were trying to like see which ones would
make the most sense and build upon each other.
Make the most sense with connecting, because like you like in Blood of Elves, we get more into kind of the main plot,
right?
The main plot.
You get all the background.
But this is like the origin story stuff, and kind of weaving the origin story stuff through with some of the Nilfgaard stuff. That is kind of a difficult decision to make, and Grain of Truth kind of didn't fit in with that. But including Ciri would be really, I mean, that would be super interesting, right? Because we just discussed a little bit of that on the podcast of Surprise last week, having Ciri kind of be Roach a little bit, the Sherlock Holmesy stuff that's going on there, and then Nivellen obviously being a little bit of a misogynist, and then her and Ciri being really intelligent and magical, and then that kind of conversation going on with not just Geralt and Nivellen, but also Ciri and her kind of learning how dangerous the world is with that whole scenario. So that'll be really interesting to see if it's like Geralt and a flashback and him telling the story around like a campfire type deal, like a fireside type chat, or if it's actually them going together.
Now, one thing I don't think I've ever asked you about was, do you think the way that they did the timeline was it? Do you think that was influenced at all by Westworld, the season 1 of Westworld, and the
I
success
don't.
of it, or do you think it was just out of necessity?
No, I think it was out of necessity because the
Yeah,
showrunner did explain like that they didn't want to cut Siri out of season 1, right? So, and
yeah,
because I mean they knew that Geralt was going to be one of the main POVs or the main POV, but the showrunner decided that she wanted, since Destiny has tied Yennefer, Ciri, and Geralt together, that there would kind of be like three main protagonists essentially. And like, I mean, looking at the success of Game of Thrones again, like who's the main character? That can really be argued. I think it's Jon Snow, but Daenerys and Tyrion, and you can kind of argue a couple of other characters are up
for
there in
sure.
that main character, right? So I think that really works out too, because later on in the books too, they're without spoiling too much, there are people that go their separate ways and they go to different locations and then come back and that kind of stuff. So that is something that you kind of want to set up, and you don't just want to have one perspective of someone experiencing the world, but when you have someone like Ciri who's young and she's kind of been sheltered, she experiences the world in a different way because she's kind of hasn't seen how dangerous the world is. And then Yennefer, I mean, look at the amount of abuse and stuff that she's experienced in her life, and look at Geralt. So that's, I think, a really smart decision in the way that they decided to do the different POVs, and how they're going to approach that for future seasons will, kind of really set the tone for the series.
Well, and I think there's something psychologically that was very rewarding at the end to have all the POVs kind of converge on that moment, right? Now all of a sudden it's like, okay, we're here. We're at Ciri and Geralt are together, and now all the timelines are caught up. As you saw, Yennefer's and Geralt, I think, catch up a little bit earlier in the season.
I think it's episodes 5 or 6, yeah, and then we have the great golden dragon.
Oh yeah,
that's Aziz's. I believe that's Aziz's favorite. So, but like, I mean, it's really interesting. Like picking a favorite short story and or picking a favorite episode. I felt like there was a couple of episodes where I felt that were more weak than others, but they really like the first episode of the season might be the best overall episode.
It's really good. I mean, it's really good. And I think, when you have a new series, you kind of almost have to have it that way, right? Because if people watch that first episode and it's trash, they're going to flip it off and they're not going to keep streaming, and that's just the way of the beast these days. So you got to make sure that first one really bangs. And this one does. The Golden Dragon was a really good one. It actually made me go back and rewatch it because it was, and I know it's based off of a Polish fairy tale. Maybe one of the members in the chat I know it's a pretty popular one. But it made me go back and watch. There was I think it's called The Last Dragon, or it was with Sean Connery, and I went back and rewatched that movie. It was a favorite amongst my friends as a kid.
Dragonheart.
Dragonheart. Yeah, and we latched onto that movie for one line, and it was just, "I am the last one." And because of that, we just never. It became. I think it was in the promos for it. Sean Connery as a dragon. If you haven't seen Dragonheart, go out and check it out. Especially if you like the Golden Dragon episode. It's like an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes of what that episode is. It's great.
Macro says The Lesser Evil is the first short story where we have character development. The first two were meant to as short stories, and it feels. Yeah, and that's really interesting why they put that first. So they show that we're gonna clearly have lots of character development and getting to understand these characters, the kind of the grayer characters we learn to love in Game of Thrones. So that is part of the decision that made that really interesting for them to include the first one, because Geralt is still kind of doing his contract stuff with the Witcher storyline and Temeria, and there's not as much character growth. And the grain of truth, for example, is like there isn't a ton of character growth for Geralt. He does start to learn about the world more and learn to trust Roach more. But yeah, that's kind of why I think that it was so great that they did that first.
For sure. No, and that's a good point to point out. And it's if you don't know much about the author, it's a super interesting story about how these stories and books kind of came about. With the first two just being short stories. I think the first one appeared in whether it was a newspaper or a fantasy magazine and just won a bunch of awards and prizes and was popular. So we wrote another one, and then it took off. It's really cool.
So we got so many awesome people in chat here today. I want to thank you for joining us. People were loving the Dragonheart, and then there was people saying, wasn't Bruce Lee the last dragon?
It's really Sean Connery. It's a common misconception.
So yeah, chat, really interested to see what your favorite short story was. Put it in the live chat for us. Let us know what your favorite moments were. What are some of the, what did you think? The CGI was a little bit, the Golden Dragon. I was like, oh, I thought that, but I think we've had such high expectations set with shows like Westworld and Game of Thrones. Is a little bit difficult to try to compare those.
Well, and I think maybe that's what made me think of Dragonheart, right? Because it's a 90s movie where the CGI isn't so great. But it was, and this is where things are going to be so subjective to people, because some people are going to see that, and because they're used to Westworld, they're used to Game of Thrones, they hate it. And anything that doesn't look like that isn't looking good enough.
And they're the first season of the show too. Remember, Game of Thrones had 50 or 60 million the first season, and then for the Red Wedding season, they had 100 or something.
Oh
yeah, the final season was 150 million. So
yeah, the budgets grew as the show gets popular, and there's more confidence that we can sink some money into this because it's going to make money. And I think that for other people, there's going to be, it's going to remind you of Dragonheart, or maybe there was some, maybe it was a Supernatural. Was that like a CW series where there's an aspect of it that kind of felt like that a little bit at times. And I'm sure that turned a lot of people off, but I'm sure there's a lot of fans of that sort of show that were like, oh, this, I like this. And so I'm going to latch onto it.
Not everyone is trying to galaxy brain everything. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the aspect that I like more about The Witcher 2. I felt, it's an easier read for sure than A Song of Ice and Fire. And I'm not saying I like it more than A Song of Ice and Fire, but there's more comedy. There's definitely a little bit more trolling.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Fairy tales. It's so lovable. And I think it's a lot easier to get into than A Song of Ice and Fire, which could be considered, if you're not an expert level reader, it may be a difficult read for you.
Right. Well, you know what it reminds me of a lot is the Dunk and Egg novels. I don't know if you've read any of those, but there's a lot of comedy which is absent from the Song of Ice and Fire series. They're short. They're small novellas. They're easy. They're more digestible. They have these characters that are very big, larger than life. It's a great. That's where I think the parallel to the series is probably more sort of those books than the actual Song of Ice and Fire series.
Yeah, I think so too. We talked a little bit of As Blood of Elves being the first novel. The first two books are short stories, like we said. The Last Wish, probably would probably be the favorite of the two amongst the fandom. It has maybe some more memorable characters. And the Sword of, don't get me wrong, I like Sword of Destiny, but I wouldn't put it over The Last Wish. The Last Wish has great origin stories. But it's going to, I think too, with the second season of the show, I think that it's because critics were really hard on the first season, right? And I think
it was very popular, right? It was, it was streamed a crazy amount. If my recollection isn't off.
It's like those, I think it beat out The Mandalorian, which was huge. But one thing that was super interesting, you go in the Rotten Tomatoes and you see the 67% or 70% or something, and then the popcorn, it was 93 or 92. The fans were writing reviews. I'm like, what are these critics talking about? And then there was that one review where those two reviewers are like, yeah, I skipped 3 episodes. This show is trash. You have to watch episodes 2, 3, 4, and 5 to understand what's happening with the timeline and stuff. So there was a little bit of that going on, but I think a lot of those people are going to kind of be eating their words a little bit with the second season. Like, oh, this is kind of this is Game of Thrones. That's politics and kind of some of the backstabby, cool, more magic-y stuff.
Well, there's going to be a revisionist history, I think, for sure. On that, as you're kind of describing, there's going to be people going back and thinking the first season wasn't so bad. And I know, and you had mentioned this before we started recording, and I was somewhat aware of this, that there's kind of an open for interpretation ending to the series. And another great example of this is the Sopranos ending, which at the time was very hotly debated. Most people didn't like it. And I think that's aged very well. And now if you read a bunch of what's come out, because there's been some anniversaries for the Sopranos, people are very favorable to the way that show ended and the open-endedness to it. And so, yeah, I mean, I think those things are potentially in play for the Witcher series. And, I think to be perfectly honest, that the second season I think they're set up perfectly because of just the way my understanding of the books with these short stories, and now they're kind of going into Blood of the Elves. I think they're going to really hook, line, and sinker some people.
We got another great comment from Yormi. Are you looking forward to the Witcher Nightmare of the Wolf animated movie coming soon? Yeah, so season 2 production of Witcher has been delayed like most other movies and stuff, but they did manage to get a lot of Ciri and Geralt stuff done, so that's pretty cool. For those of you that don't know, the Nightmare of the Wolf animated series is I believe it's going to be similar to the Avatar stuff, which is one of my favorite series of all time, but it's going to be about Vesemir, which is and Kaer Morhen is going to be a big part. This is the Witcher hub where Witchers get trained, and where Geralt was, and where we're going to see a lot of awesome Witchers and some of Ciri stuff. So that's going to be really interesting. That's something that can be produced and doesn't necessarily require everyone to be filming and CGI and green screens and all that kind of stuff. So yes, absolutely. I don't know if it's going to be a movie or a short series, but really, I mean, Vesemir is one of my probably maybe my favorite character from the Witcher 3, The Wild Hunt, and some of the games and in the books. So really interested to see how they go with his backstory and kind of tell that, because there's not a ton of information out there on Vesemir.
One point I'd lost when I was trying to talk about the I guess the critical reception is I mentioned Westworld 1 earlier. I feel like if that had not happened, the critical reception would be much higher, just because of the level of like how they presented their timeline and how seamless, and just it became almost, I think a lot of people who I talked to thought that The Witcher was trying to copy Westworld. People who hadn't read the books, they'd just seen the series, so they don't understand the challenges of the timeline that the showrunners really had. So they were thinking that it was a replica. And if there are people reviewing it, critics, and they're skipping episodes, then I imagine they're probably not taking the time to go read the books and the short stories. So they're probably
that happened after the season, though, so that kind of corrects a little bit, right? Where people go and search more because they want to learn more about the lore and the
100%. And then you start to think it makes more sense. You understand why they did it. And that's Westworld's one of the more well done pieces of art that's out there, that's being recorded. So, if The Witcher season 1 did not hit the timeline or nail the timelines merging as well as, Westworld season 1, if that's your opinion, that's okay. If you come in second to Westworld in that regard, I think.
Yeah. So everybody that's listening right now, like I said, again, if you're enjoying what you're listening to, please hit the like button and subscribe. Of course, you can find all of Thomas's social media, his podcast, super funny, the New Dad podcast. Highly suggest you go check that out. So you can check out that in the description of the video. Of course, leave a review rating. It really helps out podcasters and content creators. And it has been kind of a difficult time. YouTube ad rates are down, all that sort of stuff. People are getting furloughed. I know you've had a little bit of difficulty with that. So supporting content creators, I've had a difficult year. So if you guys want to help support the channel, you can do so on Patreon. All the links to all supporting the channel, all of that is in the description of the video, everyone.
Give me money. I'm poor.
No, we're not doing that. But
we're doing all right. Yeah.
But content creators are essential, I think.
Also, shout out to Canada. I'm wearing a Carly Rae Jepsen shirt. She is my favorite Canadian export. For those who don't know, maybe Azor Ahai tries to keep this on the down low. He's residing in Canada. So if you need to go hunt him down, he's in Canada.
We got history of Westeros in the chat.
Oh, there we go. Look at them.
We're all. I believe the Lesser Evil episode is almost up on Anchor for those of you who have been liking the podcast, A Surprise, our Witcher podcast. So that's going to be up shortly, I believe. So the link to the podcast is in the description of the video for those of you that do want to check it out.
Yeah, and it's if you're a fan of Witcher, you're hopefully you're listening to that and not this because Aziz and Mikal are just 1,000 times more knowledgeable and better looking than I am. So we have our sexy host Kyle here with his full-on man bun. I love the beard, and Aziz makes my thighs creamy. So those are the people to watch.
So
hopefully I'm filling in okay.
Morley says, much love from California. Much love. Yeah, everybody put where you're from. Much love from UK, England. Yormi says. Yeah. Trailer Warriors. I've actually partied with those guys in Ottawa. They're like insane. They party as hard as they party on the show. Morley has another comment / question for us. And she says, Azor Hyde, beside Blood of Elves, what other stories you both feel will be highlighted next season? So we talked a little bit about a grain of truth. So that's actually really surprising, right? And that is confirmed to be in the first episode. So
it makes sense to me because for me that was one I gravitated to immediately. So I don't know. I tend to think that I'm a low-hanging fruit type guy. Yeah. So if I like it, that's probably like a majority pop, the fandom likes. So that one I'm really into. And because I'm not as well read as you, you're probably the better person to speak to this.
It's going to be like Nivellen is a fan favorite character. And the fact that Christopher Hivji is going to be making like a special appearance for just one episode, that's huge because he's well renowned now after his role in Game of Thrones. One of kind of the best second tier characters, if you want, like one of the best supporting characters from the Song of Ice and Fire. We got Iowa, Albany, New York, Serbia, Bratislava. Nice to see you.
I went to college in Iowa. Have Iowa shout out what city? I'm interested. Hopefully it's Dubuque, Iowa. If it's Dubuque, Iowa, go Duhawks.
We got another German other than Helen in chat, Tinkerbell, and we said Bratislava, Kyle the geeky hot Viking. It's funny.
Yeah.
It's funny. I'm actually going to have another really awesome person on the channel. His name is Eric Nolan, and he's been on the show Vikings, and he does amazing singing. And I'm trying to get him on the channel next week, so we may have him on the channel. He actually recorded. He like those people who are just like perfect singers, like who do if you go on YouTube and you search up Toss a Coin to Your Witcher, and you have these male professional singers who are like opera singers. He out of nowhere, I was like, man, you have a beautiful singing voice. He literally recorded an outro for the channel. It says, toss a coin to your channel, like and subscribe. And I'm like, oh, damn. And it sounds so good. And I'm like, this guy knows how to market himself. Yeah. But he's great, and he's got a beautiful beard. But he's been on Vikings, and we're going to have him on the channel. So speaking of Vikings, he's been on Vikings and Game of Thrones. Remember
what an upgrade over New Dad.
Yeah. What was I going to say? He was there in the Tormund shot where Tormund says, blue eyes, the blue eyes where he finds Beric and stuff. So he was in that shot. He's going to come on the channel maybe next week, but I just wanted to talk about Vikings, and he's a Viking.
Very cool.
In my eyes. History of Westeros says Atlanta.
Oh,
so, yeah. So let's get it. Let's talk a little bit more, kind of just some of maybe some of the funny moments that we really, really loved from season 1 of The Witcher, because there was a lot.
Well, obviously you talk about funny moments, you're going to have to go to Dandelion. And I think that he was Gaskier, yeah, which is another fun little adaptation thing to talk about. But he really brought it. I thought in I say Mousak, but I'm actually mistaken because I keep associating Mousak with Zach Galifianakis. The actor who plays Mousak looks so much like Zach Galifianakis for me that I keep thinking he's a comedic role. But yeah, I guess Iced to a certain degree, in he brings some comedic relief to the to the show as well.
Right in the first thing he says, I was tied up. He was and Siri's right there is like, yeah, me and Kalantha were banging last night.
So I mean, those are the two guys. I mean, I don't know about you though, like that immediately jumped to mind. I'm one that was I like the comedic aspect in the books more than I think I like it in the show. So I didn't want to necessarily jump out with that because it's not necessarily the most positive thing to say. But for whatever reason, I don't know what it is. I appreciate it more in the books than in the show, and maybe it's just a preference to guest gear over Dandelion or.
Well, you're in your own mind too, right? You have your own interpretation of the characters, and you're imagining what they might look like, and all of that. You're imagining the whole world. So to see that and the difference is definitely something that I can understand.
Yeah, and I think the question of price is a good example of one where I actually thought that some of the comedic value that Dandelion Geskier brought to that, like there was a change in the plot between the book and the show where he doesn't want to go without Geralt because he basically had been, with some lord's wife. And so Geralt has to go to kind of protect him in the show. But in the books, it's a little bit different. Yeah. So I mean, like those sort of little things, I guess I appreciated that one specifically. And
building on the chemistry of the actors too, right?
Totally, yeah.
That's something that we saw in Game of Thrones with people like Jerome Flynn, who played Bronn, and Christopher Hivju.
Yeah, who got these bigger roles because all of a sudden, at least in some cases. But yeah, what about you? Were there any outside of the ones I mentioned?
Jaskier, obviously. It's crazy too because he actually plays the lute and he's a great singer. Like he's a talented musician, which is really interesting. It's so funny because Ewan Rayon is a recording artist who played Ramsay Bolton, and obviously he's not someone who's going to be playing beautiful ballads and singing praises for people because he's flaying people alive. But yeah, I mean, of course, Geralt, fuck. So someone put together a string of how many times he did that in the season, and it's got like music behind it, and it's like a music video. So that people always do that after the season. So I found that really funny. I found Kalantha to be, pretty funny too. I liked her. There's dry comedy, obviously, but that is something like Mr. Sapkowski. He's a huge troll. So I love that they carried on some of the trolling from the books of the show. But I'm in agreement with you, honestly. And I think in season 2, it'll be cool because Geralt and Ciri have some like Geralt's trying to be a new dad, like you are.
Yeah. We can get into that a little bit more.
Yeah, and Ciri, busts his balls, and without spoiling too much, that's kind of a really fun duo. Geralt has some of the same problems that he has with Yennefer.
Well, talk about baptized by fire too, right? Because myself, I'm a dad. Both of our children were from the womb, natural birth. So, I'm going to be able to see them grow into these like really cute, adorable beings, into like little assholes, like gradually, where all of a sudden, Geralt has a teen girl dropped in his lap as a dad. He's not prepared, especially given, he's prepared to deal and kill monsters. And maybe that helps a little bit. But, from my friends who are dads and have teen daughters, that's gonna be a completely.
He even says to Yennefer, "You think we'd make good parents?"
Right.
Exactly. We live in a dangerous as fuck world, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's so. Hats off to him as a new dad. He's gonna have a bit of a struggle. I'm excited to kind of take that journey with him.
Yeah, that'll be kind of one of those fun journeys that they can take, and the writing for that, they can kind of really play around with that for season 2. I think they will definitely do that. They'll expand on that a little bit, and I think we'll see some really funny moments. We got another donation. My goodness,
donation nation.
Morally, you are too generous. This is an honor for all the content creators who have been putting out excellent content. Pardon me.
Wow.
To help us get through this time. Morally says you both rock. So we really, really appreciate that.
Morally.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Really she literally supports so many different creators. And I really do gotta just shout that out. We've had people sign up to support our podcast on Anchor. We got kind of like this little Patreon thing. People have been signing up for that, so we really appreciate that. The patrons of the channel, anybody who donates anything, especially this year. You know what I mean? This year has been incredibly difficult for everyone, I think. So there's not someone that you don't know who hasn't been affected by this. So I think that we really appreciate you more. And even if you just come and listen and you just like a video, or even if you don't comment at all in live chat and you're supporting this and you're just watching, really, really appreciate that.
Well, and Kyle, I think you'll be the first person to say, right? Like rating and reviewing is probably the biggest thing you can do. Like the monetary thing is that goes above and beyond. And the people who do that are saints, I think. But rating and reviewing is so huge, you know, as far as
even just a comment.
A comment. It helps with the charts. So I know, and I was guilty of it for so long before I was a content creator. I can't tell you how many like people like yourself, even, you know, and History of Westeros, and you know, I'm gonna keep naming the same names because they're just so good. They're so good at what they do, and I really, if you're not already listening, then you need to go to and listen to these people, as well as Azori Hype. But you know, I realize like I haven't put a review on any of these people's, you know, Apple pod or wherever you listen to them, right? I haven't done a review. Maybe I rated them, but the review part's huge. The comments, I'm not telling, you know, so it's just, it goes a long ways. And I'm actually trying to donate to the Azor Hype as we speak. So if I look distracted, it's only because of that.
Wow.
Maura Lee did. It's inspiring, and that's another thing. I think you know, it can't go without being said. When you do those sort of things, it inspires others. You know, and there's a lot of times where I'll be in a chat, and you know, as Kyle mentioned, you know, I was just furloughed, but you know, you still have, you know, you're smart, you financially plan, so you have a little bit of disposable income, and you know, you give a little bit, and then you see those other people are inspired by that, and you see a kind of a chain reaction, and other people donate, and it is huge. And really, like, not to get too off topic, but who are we turning to right now in this time when we're, you know, we're stuck in our houses? It's the people who create art and content. Those are the people who are getting me through it personally. So why not, you know, thank them? And Maura Lee is a great person to put up on a pedestal and say, be more like Maura Lee.
Be like Maura Lee.
That's right.
Do a documentary on her and not Michael Jordan. But
true story.
True story. We got a comment from her. This is actually something that's really interesting too that I kind of want to touch on. Something like the catchy tunes and the fun ballads that we got. That was part of what I think makes The Witcher great too. I love Jaskier. I hope we see more of his singing next season. Of course, toss a coin to your Witcher. Big hit. Right?
Yeah.
I wonder if they can recreate that for season 2. Like, that's kind of that thing that happens every season. They get more artists to come in and write more songs, and they kind of have this kind of thing that's unique for every season. I mean, of course, we were so spoiled with Ramin Djawadi and Game of Thrones as far as like classical compositions go. But this is a little bit more playful. Like, we're talking about ballads and short stories, and there is a bard who's a main character. So that is something that's going to be really interesting to see going forward if they play around. I'm certain they have more of that planned with the success that Sonia Belosuva had, and you know, the toss the coin and all of that. So I'm going to say yes on my part. I think there's a prediction there for me. I think it's a game changer for the show.
Yeah, a resounding yes. And you mentioned his name when you talked about Game of Thrones, and I don't want, again, I feel like I'm going to the same wells here. I watch other stuff, but he was also involved in Westworld, and the music in Westworld, you know, the old-timey piano covers of the modern classics became part of it. It was like, oh, did you hear Soundgarden cover? Did you hear Nirvana? You know,
Che Box, yeah.
Yeah, so those sort of things became like a talking point of the Westworld series. And yeah, I don't see why it can't be, you know, in season 2. And just like you said, what I hope doesn't happen is I hope it doesn't become like a merchandise grab sort of thing where they're like, oh, get the next Jaskier tune on iTunes, you know, for Apple, like for, you know, I hope it doesn't turn into that and it's something more organic.
It doesn't seem like thematically that's something that they're really pushing. Like,
not at all.
If it's the narrative of the show, it's funny. If it's like that is something that they want to be really organic about, I think. And I think
totally
that they're super in touch with kind of the core values that Andrzej Sapkowski had for, you know, the books. So
and over my shoulder, you can see Netflix isn't always that way. I have all my Stranger Things paraphernalia
And you have the
and
hound,
merchandise.
the hound,
The hound, the mountain. I have an Unsullied, which is kind of off to the
You
side.
can
I'm
kind of see
noticing
me.
that.
I have my Game of Thrones blanket, and you have my banner here, and I have some
Oh yeah,
Sandrixian art.
Oh, Sandrixian's the shit.
Yeah.
Over this shoulder, there we go. I have a Game of Thrones advanced reading copy. These little magazines are like old fantasy, just magazines that people used to buy. They have short stories, and these are some of George's first. Another awesome shout out if you're a Song of Ice and Fire, Shire Mint. We have some of their coins.
Oh, they make awesome coins.
Yeah, all like right back there. And then, well, you can't see it, but I have a really cool first UK edition. I'll grab it.
They made the White Walker whiskeys and all that kind of stuff. So yeah. I have Funko. I have a Funko of Tormund right up there.
Oh yeah. So I just got this guy from Adam Whitehead. I bought a great first UK edition. And if I really wanted to go deep, I mean, I have all the Game of Thrones toys over here.
And by the way, thank you for the donation. Donating while you're a guest.
I hope I wasn't too distracting looking down at my phone. I wasn't trying to be rude. I was just trying to get that donation over to Azor Hype, because you've provided me with a lot of content and enjoyment. And like I said, it's right now, that's what's getting me through this time outside of just spending awesome time with my kids and watching cool shows like The Witcher.
So let's talk a little bit about the project we've been discussing behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Witching Hour. So I don't know if a lot of you have seen Nerd Soup, but what they did with Game of Thrones episodes is they would go back and watch I think it would be like 30, 40-minute videos. But what they would do is they would take an episode and not reacting and watching it, but what they would do is they would take down specific scenes, talk about the dialogue, foreshadowing, and they go back and kind of like rewatch the episodes and analyze it. So something that we've been discussing and that we're gonna start doing is, and this is a really fun announcement, is we're going to start something called the Witching Hour. Yeah. And basically what it is me and Thomas are going to go back and review the first season of The Witcher. We're going to break down key scenes through episodes 1 through 8. And we'll probably do like one every 2 weeks or something like that, whatever fits Thomas's schedule. And we're going to go back and do a deep dive into every episode of The Witcher for season 1 and just analyze the awesome cinematography, our favorite scenes, talk about comedy, foreshadowing, symbolism. There's specific scenes in like Question of Price that have foreshadowing, the conjunction of spears and stuff like that. And we're going to just kind of talk about that. It'll be a little bit different than what we're doing with the podcast of Surprise, because we're focusing more on the books, but it'll be something that you guys can look forward to that's a little bit different than the book stuff that we're covering on the podcast.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that a little bit of, as I'll be catching up with in the books, I'm hoping that the Unsullied nature brings a little bit something to it. I remember watching early episodes of History of Westeros where they would kind of cover the episodes, and they would do a book to show, and they would also do a show to show. And for the show to show, they would have Sean, who would come on and as someone who hadn't read Sean Pink, who hadn't read the books. Maybe I will be your Sean Pink. I'm not as handsome or as intelligent, but I'll put the shoes on and try to fill them as best I can.
But that's the cool thing, though, I think, too. Like we spoke about this a little bit earlier, and that The Witcher is super early in like. It's not season 5 of Game of Thrones, right?
Right.
It's one season. So everybody is just getting into the books and stuff like that. And I think that'll be a cool contrast to have a person who hasn't read all the books that will have a different opinion and appreciation for certain things than someone who does. So it'll be a cool little contrast when we're watching the show. And, like I said, the Witching Hour, it won't necessarily be an hour episode everything, but it's a fun thing that we're going to be doing, and some new content on the channel to discuss The Witcher.
Yeah. So if I come up with like a really bad theory, where it's like, I think Calanth is going to be raised from the dead by Geralt out of a river, and she will defeat Nilfgaard in a glorious battle. And it sounds really stupid because you've read the end. You can hate on me a little bit, but just be a little sympathetic. Just know that I haven't read the books.
But for the most part, we're going to do a fun analysis, like deep dives. Thomas has a great viewpoints on A Song of Ice and Fire. That is like, we're going to do some fun analysis. And I think that, just doing some more extended videos, like I tend to do 10, 15-minute videos, but maybe having some longer videos on the channel, and having another person speaking other than just myself will be really, really fun. And, we'll be able to work on documents and have different takes and all that kind of stuff. We do have another donation. We have Amy. She says, thanks for all the great Witcher content.
Yeah. Is that Amy Lantrip by chance?
I believe it is. She's active in the podcast, a surprise group that we have, by the way, which you can check out on Facebook. And sure. She's great. She's been a supporter of the channel for a long time.
She's an all-star. She's for sure in a bunch of communities. She's also a Song of Ice and Fire community.
Oh yeah.
Crossover. A lot of crossover in the Venn diagram. It's basically an overlap.
Also, one thing that's been really cool is happy 5-year Witcher 3 anniversary, guys. This game, after the first season of The Witcher came out, I believe it sold millions more copies, which is really interesting. So that is something that also I will be doing on the channel. Once I get my new desk in, this is kind of a little bit of a chaotic situation right now because I have an L desk. I got a new desk coming in, a gaming desk. I will be doing a full playthrough of The Witcher 3. So that is something we're going to be doing some more gaming on the channel. The Witcher 3 is my favorite game of all time. I'm going to be doing another playthrough, but you guys can have some fun gaming streams a couple times a week. I'm thinking, maybe Friday night will be something fun, stream for 3 or 4 hours. But there's going to be more Witcher content on the channel. And it's fun, too, because there's awesome lore moments that I can talk about while I'm live streaming. And this is something a little bit different to have on the channel. So that is something that I'm going to be doing, speaking of that. But I'm waiting for my new desk because this situation is kind of a little bit difficult.
And speaking of gaming, you just recently put out you couldn't keep it to 5, but you put out your most instrumental games that you played growing up. Do you want to?
Yeah, on Facebook. Yeah.
Do you want to maybe hit those for the people who aren't on Facebook who are listening? I really enjoyed that list.
Oh man, it was like 15 games though.
Yeah, I mean,
if I had to do like top 5 again, I would say Mario Kart is in my top 5, like any of the Mario Karts, because like growing up, my mom and dad had different work schedules, and I had cousins that were constantly babysitting me. So we would have all the systems and we would play all the time. So Mario Kart is definitely in there. I would definitely have to say all the Final Fantasies. That's my favorite series because I'm a huge RPG gamer. I love those kind of games. So those would be in there. Resident Evil and Silent Hill are kind of tied because we would like shut off all the lights and turn it on, and we would do like scary playthroughs. So Resident Evil is in there. What else is on my list?
Well, you said, obviously you just mentioned The Witcher 3. That probably goes without saying.
I mean, I can't remember all of them.
That's a pretty solid list. That's a really solid list.
Yeah, but then there's like, I'm scrolling on my Facebook. It's a bunch of days ago. Oh my God. Oh, here it is. No, you go with yours.
So.
Oh, GoldenEye N64.
Yeah, GoldenEye. That's on both of our lists. I think that if you're a male who was born between 82 and maybe like 89, 90, you probably played GoldenEye with a bunch of your buddies. Tech Mobile, which was for me my baptism in sports related video games. I know this is one I didn't mention, and I think in the comments I said would probably, if I had 6, I would put it on there, but I just, for whatever reason, feel compelled to mention it, is Bad Fur Conquers, or
Conquers Bad Fur Day.
Bad Fur Day, yeah. That game was fantastic. The Grand Theft Auto, I believe 3 was my baptism into that, which was
Tony Hawk Pro Skaters being mentioned by Tony, and they're getting remade.
I saw all those
amazing,
fantastic. This is a true story. About around the same time of The Witcher being released, I went through this thing where I was like, I wanted to play the old Tony Hawk games. I couldn't find them. I had gave my old PlayStation 2 to my brother, or PlayStation 3. I have a PS4 now, and so I bought Tony Hawk Pro Skater 5. It's not that bad. Everyone has really shit on the later. 5, it was enough to like scratch that itch. So you can
only remake a game so many times, right?
Yeah, I'm hotly anticipating
specifically those type of games.
Yeah, 2, I'm really anticipating 2. So when it gets made, I'll be a sucker. I'll buy it for sure. And I bought the God of War games on your advice as well, and I really enjoyed those.
Yeah, the newest God of War game, specifically God of War 4. Well, this is called God of War. where is it? I have it in here somewhere. But that one is amazing because
Yeah.
they recreate the story of Kratos, and he has a son. He's a new dad.
Yeah, that's the one I played. So I really enjoyed that recently.
Well, Yormi says my top 3 games are God of War, which we were just talking about, Red Dead Redemption 2,
I
and
play
The
a lot of
Witcher
that.
3. Witcher 3 is one of my favorite games of all time. That one, it has like hundreds of hours of content. So that's just
I think I put Contra on there too, because that was one I remember playing.
that NES games, yeah.
A ton, yeah.
Double Dragon,
Contra, yeah.
Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is probably in my top 5. The original Diablo probably is. Like I would do like online, like Blizzard.net, like some of the first online gaming.
Oh yeah, and then honestly, the game I'm probably playing the most right now is Crusader Kings 2, which I'm kind of at a point where I'm a little burnt out of that. I'd almost rather watch Aziz play that than actually play it myself.
Aziz and Joe Magician do streams on that one.
Yeah. So I haven't caught the Joe, although he's another one from the fandom.
There was also a lot of fighting games that we had. Like we had Tekken tournaments, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, that was huge. The arcade version of that. I mean, if we went to talk about arcade games, it's almost a totally different list, right? Golden Axe, The Simpsons, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Those are the ones that really like drive home my arcade love, but they're different from I don't want to get too far off track.
But yeah, no, I think that's where we're gonna stop it for today. We talked a ton about our love for the Witcher show books and the games too. Well, I'm going to continue this What Makes Great series. I'm going to have Helen on. We're going to talk about some Star Wars. We'll talk about different projects. What makes Vikings great? Hopefully with Eric Nolan coming on the channel, we'll be doing that. So a fun new series to have on the channel. We'll be discussing The Witcher again if I have new guests and have new perspectives on the show. And I thought, it would be a positive thing where we could take a look at, franchises, Game of Thrones, even shows that we like, Lost, stuff like that. We can go back and talk about what makes them great. So new series on the channel, and that's going to be continuing. If you did enjoy this today, like I said, me and Thomas are going to be teaming up doing the Witcher Hour. Probably we'll work on an episode next week. We'll see how our schedules work out, but that's going to be coming out. We're going to be doing The End's Beginning, which is the first episode of The Lesser Evil with Renfrey and all that kind of stuff. So we'll be doing that soon. And yeah, if you want to check out Thomas and everything he does, the New Dad podcast, all of his social media, you can go check it out. iTunes, Spotify, all of that is in the description of this video.
That's right. And one thing I didn't give to Kyle was my Gmail address for New Dad. I'm going to be putting out an email bag pretty soon. So if you want to submit a question last minute, it's newdadpod@gmail.com. So, shoot me a question. I'm going to be finalizing that episode and putting it up in the next couple of days. I love the email bags because it's just I'm sure, as you'll say, an opportunity to interact with the fandom is always fun.
Oh, yeah.
I just have like 7 fans, so it's like the same 7 people that email me. One of them's my mom, who's just like, quit telling people I'm a drug addict. And I'm like, oh, Mom, you were kind of a drug addict for a while, so I have to talk about it. So, we're always looking for new fans, and I like to think that it's fun. We're going to be ending season 1 on Father's Day, which I think is pretty fitting, and then we're going to take a 2 to 3 week hiatus. And we have some reinvention that we're going to do for season 2. We'll kick off sometime probably early August, late July.
Cool. I hope that I will not be on the New Dad podcast anytime soon.
Yeah.
I won't be.
If you did, you were doing quarantine very wrong.
Yeah. So thanks everyone for watching. I appreciate it. I see Agnieszka, who's playing The Witcher 3 and also Polish. So it's nice to see her in chat. Maura Lee, John Haymaker, everybody that showed up today, Amy Landtrip. I see Vlad. He says, damn, I'm late. You can go and rewatch this. So thank you for everyone that watched today. Like I said, you can find all of Thomas's socials in the description of this video. Of course, if you enjoyed this, you can like and subscribe to the channel. I do have the link to our Witcher podcast called The Podcast of Surprise on Anchor. All the links to that in the description of the video. And if you do want to see more bonus content, Witcher-only polls, scripts for videos, all that sort of stuff, you can support the channel on Patreon. I have the link to that in the description of the video. So thanks for joining us today. Thomas is going to be back on the channel soon, and be on the lookout for more videos on the channel. Thanks for watching, everyone.
Sorry, one other thing. If you're not a parent and you want to check out New Dad, I have a new series coming out called Storytime with Uncle Tickles. totally unrelated to being a dad or a mom. It's just some of the guests that we've had on and some of their crazy stories with Uncle Tickles, who is me, this ugly bug we got here. So yeah, that was one last thing I forgot to shout out. Sorry.
No.
You were on a roll there. I felt really bad. But yeah, say goodbye to everybody for us.
And of course, it goes without saying, stay safe, everyone. Thank you for joining.